Brock Purdy in the rain. Is that a thing now in your mind? Is that becoming a thing?
Feels weird.
Yeah.
I mean, Brock is not a flamethrower, and so then all of a sudden it seems like when there's weather, it takes a, it's just hard. It's hard to rip a ball in the rain, and but yet you've got to figure out how to do it, and so that can't be a theme. I mean, I refuse, and he needs to refuse for that to be a theme, because in the NFL, that just can't, you can't have that. Well, he's great in the sunshine. Like, no, you gotta be a mutter, and you got to figure out how to be a mutter, and so yeah, it seems like there's something there, and he's going to have to, like so many people in their careers, have to keep answering, jumping over the hurdles that show up to figure out how you become a great player, and look, for Brock, it's always, we've talked about this 1,000 times. He said 1,000 times, he didn't say 1,000 times, but a couple of times he said, I'm not the biggest, I'm not the fastest, I'm not the strongest. Okay, I get that. He gets it. And he's an amazing processor. We've said he's got elite processing power. But the game today is dominated by big arms and big legs. You have to have them both. And because there's so much space out there. And so Brock, and we've talked about the retail game in the past, that's his game. And he's going to have to go through the retail route to get it out quick, make all the plays, drive it all the way down the field, to get it in the end zone. And last year was a freaking amazing thing. I mean, I just was in awe of how that went down. And now this year, obviously, significantly more difficult and challenging. And he's going to have to now iterate his game and figure out, and we talked about it in the preseason, what does Brock need to do? He needs to get out of the pocket. He needs to attack the line of scrimmage. He needs to, and you saw he was way niftier than you thought. And I think that's the part of it, like, he's just going to have to figure out how to answer all of the challenges, all of the doubts, and consistently have something to say about it. Otherwise, the NFL will, I probably talked last week about how predatory it is. They eat you up. And so he's, as it comes up, he's going to have to shout it down.
Talking to Steve Young on the Umer guest line. In terms of his decision-making this year or where he's gone with the ball, I know he's been more inconsistent this season. Is there anything you can see in his game that's different than what we saw last year? I mean, again, the people around him and the players around him, there's no McCaffrey, which is a huge factor. He had a bigger run game with Mason at the start of the year. He had a full receiving core, or most of a full receiving core, for the beginning part of the season. So just what are your thoughts, or what have you seen in terms of his inconsistency this year?
Coach, quarterbacking, I mean, I want everyone who loves football to have I wish I could give them a shot at standing in the quarterback's shoes, and going back and trying to find somebody open. Like, I want that for everybody, so they can go, what the hell? There's no way. Get me out of here, man. I don't want to do this. This is a hard no. Like, I don't want to have any part of this, because last year everything flowed. Everything was, look, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but everything was open. Everything worked. And everything was, kind of moved in a way that it got into a pattern where you couldn't stop, and defenses got swamped. They didn't know, they were turned around in circles. And I've said this 15 times, if not 20, the stat that is still, and I want people to understand what I'm saying, yards per attempt is I think it's a great stat. It's kind of tells you a little bit how explosive you are. And 8.5 is a great number. 9 is an amazing number. And the second in the league in yards per attempt for all passes last year, I want to say, you guys have to look it up. Dang, I want it might have been the Chiefs or the Bills, I can't remember, was 9-1 or something. For 49ers last year, passes behind the line of scrimmage, and I know I've said this before, but I just want to make sure everyone understands what I'm saying. When you throw screen passes, the 50 passes that were behind the line of scrimmage last year averaged 9.5. So that is never going to happen again. I want to bet my life that will never happen again. And so this year, as things are more difficult, right? There's linemen are more in your face all of a sudden. You're not getting the protection. Defenses are not as afraid. People are clamping down. The routes that used to be wide open are now challenged and contested. And if you're a great processor like he is, he's not going to just throw it around randomly. That's not his game. So he's going to try to find, who's open. And that's where you're noticing his game fraying a little bit because it's not as obvious. And it's not necessarily something he could do anything about. It's like he's trying to find that person, like, where's the truth in this play? And then people want to go after Kyle, and it's like, well, the protection's falling apart, the guy's not, the separation's not there, the speed's not there, the defenses are creeping on you, and all of a sudden, this space gets limited. And then opportunity gets limited. Then you throw balls that you wish you maybe didn't throw, like yesterday's game, last ball he threw, or the third to last ball.
The interception, yeah, right.
It was like, it was just like, bro, no. And he as soon as he threw, it was like, because I think he believed that Ricky was going to do something different. And he thought the relationship was something different. He was willing to take a risk at it. And just as you let go of a long ball, especially as you get hit, because he got hit and kind of smothered right as he was letting it go. So he had to think about it a little bit earlier, and the ball's actually starting to be thrown much earlier than you realize, and then it's out, and now all of a sudden by the time it's in the end zone, it's like, bro, what are you looking at? I was like, what he's looking at is the relationship he had. He believed that something was going to happen. It was rational because that's what his superpower is. He's not going to see something and go, oh yeah, I didn't see it right. That's something I don't think Brock will ever have happen. But yet things happen. He has to let it go early, and it's just that's the NFL in so many ways, and that's why it's hard when people say when everything's not working well, what's your game? What is the things that you can do to elevate, to go beyond the X's and O's they always talk about? What's the ability you have to just say, you know what, it's going haywire, and I'm not going to be able to process through everything. What can I do to just create? And today, 2024, and always has been a value, but in 2024, it is the supreme value, the ability to go create. And that's where his game, he's going to have to figure out how to be a bigger creator outside the X's and O's.
Yeah, and you were right, Steve. 9.6 last year for yards per attempt. I think Tua was second at 8.3. But just going through everything that's happened this season, the way it's gone, can you pinpoint maybe one thing that you've seen of what's caused this season to be a disappointment?
Well, it's all of it, right? It's Brandon's holdout, which in many ways was a theme. It wasn't him, but it was Nick and it was Trent, and it was every big name knew that, how do I say this? There was such a desire to be in the Super Bowl. You got to understand that's why I feel so terrible today for this Super Bowl window. I don't know how closed it is or open. We won't know, but just that it's not going to be as open as it was last year. And those guys that are down there that have such a desperation in a positive, in a really, not desperation is the wrong word, but just a longing to win it, to have one, and I just feel for them today because it just got to a distance right now that is super tough, and so you think about what happened this year. It started with people holding out for like maximum dollars. And that's not always the wrong thing. It's not. I'm not going to blame anybody, but it's and then people get hurt, and then there's also, we talked about what we call the Super Bowl hangover, which is just the emotional wherewithal that the team has to have. That's a collective. We talked about it last week, and they were tired. They're emotionally spent from the Super Bowl loss. It was brutal. And they needed some time to gather themselves. They needed September and a lot of October to gather themselves. And they needed to win those tight games in L.A., the tight game against the Cards. They needed to win those games that they should have had. They needed so they could find their foot about a couple weeks ago, like at Thanksgiving time, when all of a sudden I said last week that they're 7-3, and now they've got the emotion for it and the health for it and all the rest of it. And so they needed some things to break their way, and it didn't. And it's a collection of all kinds of things. Because remember, I told you also, the whole league studied the 49ers.
Yeah.
They've been studying Kyle Shanahan for 2 or 3 solid years. They do that with Andy Reid. They do it with Kyle Shanahan. Those are the two guys that everybody studies. And everybody says, not again, not again, not again. And every defensive coordinator in the league saying, not again, and that's why now Kyle is going to have to innovate again. Like, you have to reinvent yourself. I say Andy Reid, 67 years old, continues to reinvent himself year after year, game after game, and Kyle has done that as well, and he'll have to do it again to reinvent himself.